I tried to delegate tonight's talk to somebody very special. And this is Minka. This is one of my hairy children who are never going to leave home. Okay. So what am I going to talk about this evening? I'm actually going to talk about prisons and institutions. That's really going to cheer us up, isn't it? Okay. But before I do that, I want to tell you a story. And it's a story that is true. But when I stand on platforms like this, I'm often subjected to criticism from the scientific community, and criticism and dismissal from the psychological society, because I have no evidence for the story I'm just about to tell you. There is no empirical research that's going to say whether it's right or wrong. But I'm certainly prepared to take that risk, because having worked in the laboratory of human experience for so long, when we talk about affairs of the heart or the soul, they cannot be subjected to these sort of research methods. And not everything that is scientific means it's untrue, so it's true necessarily or valuable. Okay, so I'm going to expand a few minds here. But this story I want to tell you happened in Hawaii. It's about a psychiatric institution, another form of prison. And many years ago, in the Hawaiian State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, there was a terrible situation where the staff turnover was so high because the inmates were so troublesome that they were seeking a director to try and work with those patients there to try and overcome the problems they were facing. The type of people they had in that institution in Hawaii were in there for heinous crimes. Things like multiple rape, abuse, torture of other people, awful things. And so you can imagine that the staff didn't want to work there. Many of the patients were shackled. They were given sedatives and drugs to stop them abusing the staff. The staff walked with their backs against the walls. You can imagine this sort of environment. Who would want to work there? And so at a last-ditch attempt, they introduced this man. And he did something very unscientific. And yet the results he got were very important. And why am I telling you this story? Because there's something in here that we can all learn and use. And as my clients know, I never share any story or any technique that I don't use on myself, that I don't know is proven to work. This is the gentleman I want to talk about. Has anybody ever heard of him? A lot of people that haven't heard of him. Okay, Dr. Hugh Leng. Well, he's actually called Dr. E. Oliokalu Hugh Leng. Anybody that can spell it can actually get a prize here. And when he was actually asked to come and work at the Hawaiian State Hospital, they said to him, please come and work there. The staff turnover is so high, the abuse of the staff, we don't know what to do. We'll do anything as long as you join us. And Dr. Hugh Leng, this gentleman here, said, I will come and work with your patients. And I will manage the staff as long as I don't have to see any of the patients. Now, what sort of a doctor says they're going to get results in a psychiatric institution, but they don't want to see the patients? But they were so desperate that they took him on. And what actually then happened is that over a period of time, things started to get better. The staff started to stay. The patients were taken off their medications and they were unshackled. They started to respond to the rehabilitative efforts of the staff, the other staff that were working with them. So much so that over a period of about 2 years, people started to get better. And they left. And in 5 years, that hospital was closed down. Now you can Google this, you can read about it in a book called Zero Limits. Where's the scientific evidence? This guy never saw anybody. So what did he do? Now, I heard him in an interview a while back, and he was asked, is it true that you worked in the Hawaiian State Hospital from this year to the next one? I'm sorry, I can't remember which year it was. You can Google it. And he said, yes, it is. Is it true during that time that many of the patients got better? He said, yes. Is it true that in 5 years it closed down? Yes. Is it true that you never saw a patient? He said, yes. And they said, well, that's rather strange. This is in Zero Limits. What did you do? He said, I used a technique called self-identity, Ho'oponopono. Okay, got Dr. E. Oliopaloohula with self-identity Ho'oponopono. Now, what is that? Now, in the interviewer is a gentleman called Joe Vitale. You may have seen him in The Secret. Not many people know that Joe Vitale is an academic. He wrote the definitive textbook for the American Marketing Association. He's quite a smart cookie. And he asked this gentleman, how come that you saw none of the patients and then they got away? And he said to them, do you believe that what we think and what we feel and what we do results in certain consequences? And Joe said, yes, of course. Do you believe that the way we look at the world, how we respond, what we think in our minds, influences other people? And he said, yes. He said, well, if a heinously criminal person comes into your life, didn't you have a part in creating that? Whoa. What a huge leap forward in personal responsibility. Does that mean that what the sort of things we see that we don't like, some of the things that make people become vegans, in fact, do we have a part to play in that? Now, of course, we don't necessarily directly create them. But is there something here energetically, very unscientifically, that what we do, how we think about things, how we treat ourselves, sometimes the self-abuse we give to ourselves of not allowing ourselves to have the freedom that we truly want to have or live by our values. Is it possible that collectively there is some creation of what we do on the outside as the inside? So how did he do this? Because that's really what he's saying, is actually how we are affects the outcome too. So if something comes into our life, what can we do about it? Did we partly create it? It's a huge leap in personal responsibility, isn't it? Okay. So what he said he did, he said he went into a room on his own and he read the files of the clients. Now, you can imagine the court details of these awful situations. And as he read them, he allowed whatever emotion came up through him to be experienced. He said he felt rage, he felt nausea, he felt anger. And he said what he would do was to hold it up to the divine. Now, whatever our notion of the divine is, that doesn't really matter. But what he was saying is that something beyond ourselves, whether it's part of us or it's beyond ourselves, he said he held that sort of experience up and he said 4 things. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. I'm sorry. I don't know what it was in me, in my life, that helped create what I'm seeing outside in my patients. Please forgive me. I didn't realise that what I do had a part to play in creating this whole universe. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity for cleaning up on me on the inside so that I can make a change in the outside. And I love you. He said that was one of the strongest things we could do to ourselves, is to be compassionate to ourselves in order to be compassionate to others. Now, I don't know about you. What are you thinking at the moment? I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you, and we have a psychiatric institution closed down. It's a bit of a far leap, isn't it? But you can look at the physical evidence of that actually happening when you do a bit of research on it. But I actually think this makes a lot of sense. Because actually, what I know through my experience of my own life and working with probably hundreds of people is that if we truly want to change the world, we have to change ourselves. The choices we make every day in terms of our values, our beliefs, our actions, have a part to play because we are an example to other people of how we would have the world to be. And never, ever think that a change you make will not affect other people. Because people are often observing, even if they don't want to talk to you about it. They see something about you. Become a good example for others. So he's pretty cool, this guy. But it also means that for many people, and I imagine many people here are vegan, or even if you're not vegan, you may have a passion around the world of trying to make it a better place. But you will come across things that are very challenging. Now, this is a wonderful technique to use in that moment. It doesn't mean that what you see or the people involved are not accountable for what they do. But sometimes that emotion comes through us and we feel murderous rage or anger or fear. Is to take that emotion, to sit with it, and to process this. really works. When we actually allow ourselves that motion to pass through us, and to also redirect our energy so that instead of becoming limited or depressed by that, it's possible for us to move forward. So that's one technique I want to leave you with, because we're going to see, or not leave you with, I've got another one to talk about in a second, is what we're going to see this evening is live and let live. Whatever your reaction is to something like this gives you an idea of some of the limitations we have. I encourage us all to be curious, to open our minds, to say, tell me more. It's so easy for us actually to look at myths and falsehoods just because they're socially and culturally acceptable. Things that we've been taught to be true. We often look for evidence from other people. What should I do? And I write a lot about myths. The shoulds, the oughts, and the musts. Whenever you use that in your language about something in your life that you want to do, but perhaps you don't allow yourself. I should be doing this. I really ought to get a sort of job that would move me in the right direction. I must get on the property ladder. These are all myths, possibly, unquestioned assumptions that are not really reality. They're actually perception, as Glenn was saying a moment ago. So one of the books I've written is The Myths of Life and the Choices We Have, and it talks about those unquestioned assumptions. Does anybody want this? First person to come out and get it can have it. Here's the first example. When we take inspired action, we get results. The thing is, most of us are imprisoned by our minds, beliefs we have of what is possible. And the film we're going to see tonight is going to expand our minds. It's going to keep us looking at different ways to do different things. Some of the challenges we face at this time in our history often leave me often thinking, perhaps, and you often thinking, is it possible, economically, politically, will it ever change? But actually, often it's only as the limits of our mind that keep us in that very limited way. Now, I feel tonight, but I'm not as eloquent as I normally have. And many people in this room probably realise and know why that is. And this is a great difficulty. Our poor MC here is going to suffer here when I tell her that my dog did die this week. And many people in this room have actually shared that with us. Over Facebook, many would have shared that. And I'm very aware that it's been quite difficult to come here this evening. And yet I know I'm in a community of people that have been very supportive of that. Is live your values. Okay? Decide what it is that is important to you. And choose according to that to do, be, and act, and have the type of conversations, keep the company, do the work that truly reflects those values. Challenge the myths, the unquestioned assumptions of what you think is possible. The story I told you tonight about Dr. Hugh Len is a pretty out there story. But actually, sometimes, if all we've got is a hammer, every problem becomes a nail. Be open-minded, be curious. It's so easy for us to jump to conclusions about people that perhaps don't make the same life choices as ourselves, to actually be even superior, to actually think you're more progressed. But actually all of us are works in progress. Create new habits. Okay, the Sydney Challenge, the 30-day challenge, is a wonderful way for vegans and non-vegans to go through a process to create new habits. But also dare something worthy. Okay? Now, I'm not sure I can tell you the next slide, but I'm going to. I'd like to pay a little tribute to this young lady here, because she actually only left us a few days ago. But she's also got a very important story for us here, because we've talked about limitations and myths, and being open-minded sometimes that might limit us. But actually, what about the opening of our heart and the limitations we put on ourselves when we feel pain? Because I bet everybody in this room, whether you've been encouraged to come here or you've chosen yourself, you want a better world. You want a better health. You want a better community. You want a more compassionate world. You want a better world for animals. But the risk is when we open our hearts, we hurt. Would I have taken one of those 5 years that I spent with her and put them aside for the pain I might feel now? Absolutely not. And I encourage every one of us that when we come across challenges or difficulties where we think, gosh, it's just not possible, I'm sharing information with people about the environmental, the people, the animal challenges I see, and they're just not getting it. You can choose to close your heart down and become shriveled and difficult with people, or you can open your heart and do what Dr. Hugh Len says, is work on yourselves, be compassionate, leap ahead for other people, and show them the way to a better world. So thank you for showing me that, allowing me to show that to you. And thank you this evening, because I appreciate that I'm really not as eloquent as I normally would hope to be and share with you. But it's lovely to be in a community of people like this, who I know aren't really judging people. Okay? Let's pass back to Kim. Let's have a fabulous evening and enjoy the film.